I did have a warning for you. It comes in the form of a simple little poem. If you must sleep through the sermon, said the pastor, oh so prim, please try to snore in the same key as the closing hymn. Just fair warning. Frankly, I wasn't quite sure how to begin this morning. Officially and very unofficially, I've been privileged to serve this congregation for over 36 years in one way or another. Preaching happens to be one of those ways, and I'm glad I have a chance to do a little of that. And this time I get 2 tries to get it right. Again in 2 weeks. Today I want to focus our attention and our purpose on an inward look at who we are. On February 23rd, I'll ask us again to refocus our attention and purpose, but then on how our inward purpose shows up in our outward efforts to embody what we hope will result in doing what Jesus calls us to do. To love our neighbors and our enemies. A little friend here. I also hope it's pretty clear that the shaggy dog is a vital reminder, at least to me, of where we must begin our refocus. Always learning to begin with our hearts. Which may make it seem ironic that I'd like for you to first think about phoropters. Put simply, this instrument that the eye doctor asks, by the way, you who wear glasses, did you ever know what you were looking through? What it was called? It was just a thing. Still, so it's a phoropter, and there's a good explanation in the bulletin if you need a reminder. But simply put, the instrument that the eye doctor asks us to look through is basically used to determine the lens prescription that will provide you with the clearest vision. It's as simple as that. Complex instrument, but the purpose is simple. Is it better on 1 or 2? 3 or 4? I've been waiting for the doctor to get to 27. Never happened. The doctor clicks back and forth on those lens refractions, looking for the tiniest way to improve your vision. Well, I noticed 2 things about this particular slide. One, the patient needs to declare which lens improves her vision, even just a little bit. The second thing is that she doesn't do it alone. She depends on the doctor who's been trained to use the phoropter as a tool to improve this young woman's vision. We always need support from someone, something, from somewhere to sharpen our vision. So, it's time to return to the shaggy dog. And to other people who have difficulty seeing. My word stories suggest pretty clearly that it's the heart that gets shaggy dogs and people where they need to be. But how do we nurture that heart? How do we sensitize our hearts and push away the cynicism or the fears that seem to be creeping around us and within us? Sight, our physical eyes, sight is not the only sense needed to help us refocus on the purpose significant to give our lives meaning, that begins with us and then radiates outwardly. And who will be there to help that refocus we need to see better with our hearts? I think those are two of the essential questions on our spiritual journeys. We may not ask them in those ways, but I think they're essential. I've never had the final answers to those questions any more than many questions that I ask. Never had the final answers, whether for myself or for other people. The answers keep shifting according to my life experiences, according to what I'm reading or feeling intellectually, and how I respond to those questions. Frustrating for me. It's been frustrating for people that I've been in conversation with who, for better or for worse, might come to me for final answers. But I have had the God-inspired confidence to keep asking the questions. And I hope I've passed that confidence along to others so that they can ask their own questions without fear. Maybe the question obsession that I have is what moved me to become a conflict mediator 35 years ago, and a spiritual director maybe 20 years ago. Because I believe deep in my heart that reconciliation is so critical for our well-being, for the well-being of our relationships with others, for our well-being with our relationship with God. And that's why it's important, I believe, for us to pay attention to another one of our senses, our ears. Do you sense a theme here? Listen. This is the call of the Jewish Shema. Listen to the spirit within that reminds us God calls us to love with our hearts, our minds, and our strength. God's love of us never fails, even when we believe we've been abandoned by God. Even when our actions are burdened by a moralistic rigidity that substitutes correct actions for love. We can hear the Jewish tradition in Deuteronomy called the Shema. We can memorize the greatest commandments in Matthew, where Jesus includes love of neighbor as well as listening to God. We can use them as reminders that will nurture our hearts when we're blind or our hair is hanging down all over our eyes. Well, some of us have that kind of hair. I'd like to introduce you to Jerry, not his real name. Jerry has been occasionally writing to me after some of my Faith and Values columns appear in the Spokesman Review. This past week, he didn't even pretend to follow the theme of my column, which was about aging faces. In his early 80s, Jerry has been a very frustrated man when it comes to institutional religion, particularly the multiple failures of the Catholic Church, not just recent years, but over the centuries. He has a long laundry list of frustrations. I've been mistaken to think that his frustration reflected some kind of hope that he could reconcile his anger about the church. This past week, I finally realized he believes the church, and not just the Catholic Church, is basically evil. He wants nothing to do with it. So I'm puzzled why he even writes to me. He knows that I'm a man who believes reconciliation of some kind is always possible. He thinks I'm naive, but he keeps writing. I don't know if he's going to continue to write to me. He's resistant to hearing my understanding of living, and yet he keeps writing. I don't understand that. What I do understand is that reconciliation doesn't begin with our fears and our angers, but with God's love. Micah 6 reminds us that our efforts to sacrifice or turn religious somersaults of one kind or another, those efforts aren't what God wants from us. Reconciliation, in whatever form it takes, begins with God's unwavering love for us in whatever form we're ready to recognize it's happening. We can be untrusting of God, and we are. We can be fear-driven to separate ourselves from God and from others, and we do that too. But the God love Jesus embodied is always there, waiting for us. John Wesley calls that prevenient grace. As it has been for centuries and will continue to be there in our futures and our great-great-great-grandchildren's futures. Where do we know this? Not just in our heads. Our thinking capacity is so important. It's critical when we look through the foreopter to be able to see when our visual sight is better. I mean, that's one way of using our intellect. But perhaps there was real intention when the final version of the Shema was settled on and written down in Deuteronomy. Because it begins, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. Perhaps the shaggy dog's ancestors, whatever they might have looked like, were helpful reminders to the wise ones of Israel that seeing with our eyes may be secondary to seeing with our hearts. For one brief moment in 1977, I think maybe I was onto something. The God of love made our hearts to give our eyes new sight. Amen.